Hi, like and subscribe for the more horror stories. Story 1.
I was running as fast as I could, but I knew it was gaining on me. I swear it was trying to step in every puddle, so I knew it was running faster. I turned my head where I could see it. Its arms were limp as they swung back and forth in front of its torso. Its disjointed jaw bounced up and down, making an uneasy chattering sound, and its plastic-like face was splattered mud. How could I have ever let this happen? It all started when my dad came home from work, an hour late. Being the realist that I was, I figured he stopped for groceries or something. I guess I was half right when he came in carrying a box about a human child size. "You mind helping me with this, James?" he asked. As I went to help him carry the box, I got a much closer look at it. It looked like an antique. The box was made of a very smooth decorative wood, and the edges of the opening were made of a reddish metal. After we placed the box on the coffee table in the living room, I asked Dad, "What's in the box?" "It's a surprise for your birthday tomorrow," he replied. "How much did this cost?" "That doesn't matter. You shouldn't worry about that." "Expensive. Ever since my mum died, Dad would always buy me far too expensive presents, mostly on stuff I don't need. I would really want a new mattress for my room. Mine feels like a pile of rocks, and I find it really hard to sleep at night because of this." I was still thankful for whatever was in the box, of course, but I have to admit that the thing I was looking forward to most tomorrow was my friends coming over to hang out. That night, when I was lying in bed trying to sleep, I heard a slight tapping coming from somewhere outside of my room. It stopped as quickly as it started, so I overlooked it. I continue lying in bed trying to sleep. I continue lying in bed trying to sleep. I continue lying in bed trying to sleep. Giving up, I turned on my phone to see that I had been trying to sleep for a little over an hour. In about 45 minutes, it would be my birthday. I began to hear the tapping again. It wasn't loud enough to wake anyone up, but it was certainly annoying. Unlike the first time I heard it, this time it didn't stop. A continuous tap that felt like it was digging into my brain. Eventually, enough was enough, and I crawled out of bed and left my bedroom. I followed the tapping around the house, soon being led to the box sitting on the coffee table. In the living room, I sat on the couch and the tapping continued. Not being able to hold back, I began to open the box. I woke up from Dad nudging my head with his foot. I sat up and looked around to see that I had slept on the floor outside the living room. "What are you doing down there?" Dad asked. "I don't know. I couldn't finish my sentence as I saw the box lying on the coffee table. That's when I remembered opening the box and seeing two deep reflective grey eyes on a beastly-looking doll that slightly resembled a dog." "What's in the box?" "That's why you were sleeping on the floor?" Dad asked me. "Go on and look inside. It is your birthday now." I stood up and slowly walked toward the box. I opened it to see not a dog, but a ventriloquist dummy. The only resemblance to the doll I had seen last night was the eyes. The dummy had pale skin, a big nose, and bright red hair made of the same material that the rest of the dummy's head was. The bottom jaw was oddly missing from the head, but I did find it under the dummy's body, which was wearing an all-black suit. The bottom jaw had teeth carved into it, which I found weird since the top jaw didn't have any teeth, and the string that I would pull to open and close its mouth was the same string that holds the bottom jaw to the rest of the head. I slipped the string through a hole under the top jaw where I could grab it behind the back of its neck. I tied the string on the end so the bottom jaw doesn't fall off. The way the jaw hung there made it look much longer than it was. "Do you like it?" Dad asked. "Of course," I replied. "I saw it in a store window on my way home from work yesterday and thought of you and how you used to love ventriloquism," Dad said. "I did always love ventriloquism. I had a ventriloquist act in my school talent show. While I was a talented ventriloquist, I wasn't a very good comedian. I didn't get any laughs. I would have been better off if the audience had booed me off stage. I put on a smile and sat the dummy on my lap. Through the dummy, I said, "Hello, James's dad. I'm Mr. Longjaw. You don't mind if I stay here a while, do you?" Dad laughed as he said, "You can stay as long as you like, Mr. Longjaw." The doorbell rang, and I jumped up, setting Mr. Longjaw back in the box as I ran to the front door. When I answered it, hoping to see my friends, I was struck with disappointment as I saw my Uncle Zeke instead. I made sure that disappointment wasn't visible when he saw me, however. "Hey there, birthday boy," Uncle Zeke said. "How old are you today?" "I'm going to need an answer. I really don't know." "I'm 13, I said. "What? You're not that old yet?" Uncle Zeke had bright blonde hair and even brighter blue eyes. Being my mum's brother, he was the closest I've ever seen of her, genetically speaking. Uncle Zeke went over to the living room as the doorbell rang again. I opened the door to see my two closest friends, Rebecca and Tyler. Rebecca was a kind soul, but she was an absolute freak for the supernatural Tyler. While also kind, freaked out with any mention of anything unnatural. "Happy 13th, dude," Tyler said. "That makes Rebecca younger than both of us." Rebecca punched Tyler in the arm. "James is only a week older than me." I let Tyler and Rebecca in, and when we got to the living room, I saw Uncle Zeke holding Mr. Longjaw, jokingly pulling up and down on the string, chattering its teeth. Uncle Zeke noticed me and laid Mr. Longjaw on his lap before saying, "Hey, James, would you like to introduce me to Mr. Longjaw?" "Longjaw," I corrected. Uncle Zeke picked up Longjaw and carried it over to me. As soon as I touched it, the bottom jaw fell off and bounced off the floor. Damn it! I picked up the bottom jaw and realized that the knot I had tied on the string was too thick for it to go through the hole. There was no possibility that it could have fallen off, and I needed to untie it to put it back on. When I got up, I made Mr. Longjaw say, "Sorry, the sight of James made my jaw drop." "Wow, dude, you're really good at that," Tyler said. "You should really look into being a professional ventriloquist," Rebecca said. "How do you do that?" Uncle Zeke asked. After a couple of hours of goofing off with everyone, Dad left the room to answer his phone. When he came back, he said, "James, that was the hospital calling. They need me in the ER today. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Keep Uncle Zeke out of the fridge." "All right, Dad. See you tonight," I responded. "The thing is, you might not. They need me to work late tonight." "Okay. Guess I'll see you tomorrow then. Happy birthday, buddy." After Dad left, we continued to goof off until it got late. After Rebecca and Tyler left, I put on a ventriloquist show for Uncle Zeke. "You amaze me, James," he said. "I don't know how you managed to throw your voice like that." "I don't either," I said. "It just kind of came naturally to me." "Well, I better get going. I'll be sure to tell your dad you did a good job keeping me out of the fridge." I went to the bathroom as Uncle Zeke left. When I came back to the living room, Mr. Longjaw was gone. I figured that I had just misplaced it, so I just went to bed. I didn't stay in bed for long, though, as I heard a loud bang coming from the living room. When I went in there to check it out, I saw the box that Longjaw had come in on the opposite side of the room. This shocked me. There was no possible way for it to get there. I was too tired to worry, so I picked up the box and locked it in my closet. Once again, I wasn't quite able to sleep on my current mattress, and eventually I began to hear the tapping. I was expecting it to sound like it was coming from my closet, but I quickly realized that it sounded as though someone was knocking on the front door. I got out of bed and walked over to the front door. The knocking stopped as I got over there. I looked through the peephole, Nothing. I turned around to go back to bed when I heard the knocking again. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife for protection, but just the thought of ever needing to use it made me uneasy. Once again the knocking stopped as I approached the door. I looked through the peephole and saw nothing again. I slowly opened the door to see no one around. I grabbed my house key from right inside the door before closing and locking the door as I went outside. I didn't want anyone getting in while I was looking around. I started looking around the house when I noticed something in the bushes. It looked like a hand. It was a hand. Mr. Longjaw's hand. Somehow Longjaw got outside and was thrown in the bushes. I figured this was just a prank that Tyler, Jessica, or Uncle Zeke was playing on me. So I said, ha ha, ah, very funny, before grabbing Mr. Longjaw and unlocking the door. The door wouldn't open, the top lock was locked as well, but you can't lock the top lock from the outside. I gripped tighter on the knife as I unlocked the top lock and went inside. If this was a prank, it couldn't have been any of the earlier suspects because none of them had keys to the house. That's when I thought, Dad, he didn't need to go to work. It was all a part of his elaborate scheme, a prank beyond all pranks. So I yelled, Dad, this isn't funny anymore, give it up. No response. I began to hear my phone ringing, so I put Longjaw down on the couch as I went to my room and checked who it was. It's Dad. Of course it is. He hears me yelling and calls me to avoid suspicion. I answer by saying, Dad, stop. This isn't funny. With which he responds, What are you talking about? Listen, we need to talk. My heart skipped a beat. He was talking pretty loudly into the phone, but I didn't hear his voice around the house. About what? I asked. Uncle Zeke, Dad replied. Did you see anyone around when he left? No, I went to the bathroom as he left. What happened? Someone was in the back seat of his car and stabbed him in the back of his neck, causing him to crash. He arrived here a few minutes ago. We don't know if he's going to make it. I dropped my knife before dropping to my knees. I looked around my room to see that my closet door was slightly open. I grabbed my knife again and stood up, walking toward my closet door. I opened my closet the rest of the way. Nothing was in there that was the problem. I ran to the living room to see Mr. Longjaw sitting upright in its box with its bottom jaw lying on his lap. What are you? I asked. All realist thoughts fled from my head as Longjaw lay down on its back and the box closed around it. That's when I told myself, enough of this shit, as I walked over to the box, knife in hand, and opened it. The dog creature I had seen before jumped out at me, pushing me onto the couch. I tried grabbing it, but it wasn't showing any signs of stopping, so I sliced at it with my knife, causing it to let out a loud whimper and fall back onto the coffee table. That's when I looked into its reflective grey eyes. I woke up by my dad, shaking me on the couch. James? James, are you okay? Dad screamed. What happened? I asked. That's what I should ask you, Dad replied. I came in here and you were passed out on the couch with cuts all over your face. Mr. Longjaw, the dummy, it's alive, I said. It did this to me. James, I'm going to need you to tell me the truth, Dad said. Why was I stupid enough to expect him to believe that? I had to tell him a lie instead. We went outside yesterday and I fell into some bushes. That's why my face is cut up and my mattress is uncomfortable, so I chose to sleep on the couch. Why didn't you tell me your mattress was uncomfortable? I would have gotten you a new one, Dad said. Here, I'll get you one tomorrow. Why not today? Because it's 11 o'clock at night today. You didn't think it was morning, did you? Well, you're going to have to spend one more night on that mattress. I need the couch so I can watch my shows. All right, I said as I stood up. That's when I remembered something. The knife that I was holding had disappeared. However, it wasn't long before I found it, since the blade was sticking out of my bed, right where I would be sleeping, like my mattress could get any less comfortable. That night, I had a dream. You'd expect it to be a nightmare, but instead, I dreamt up a plan to get rid of Longjaw pretty much chaining up the box while it was still inside and lighting the box on fire. The problem was, Dad wouldn't appreciate it if I lit my birthday present on fire, and it's not like I could tell him that I didn't like it so he'd take it back. I clearly enjoyed playing with it. That's not the problem, though. The problem is that Longjaw is threatening me, and I'm pretty sure it was the one who attacked Uncle Zeke, who I regrettably discovered had died from his injuries. That morning, I called Rebecca and Tyler and told them everything. Tyler responded, "We have to kill that thing. Damn, this kind of thing isn't supposed to happen in real life." While Rebecca responded, "Cool, it's about time. I get to slay a demon." I told them to come over as I put Longjaw's bottom jaw back on. I then walked over to Dad's room to see if I could get him in the mix, but was instead met with a note that read, "James, I'm out getting a new mattress for your room. Love, Dad." I guess Dad's never going to find out what happened today. When Rebecca and Tyler arrived, I picked up Longjaw and showed it to them. "He looks like a dummy," Tyler said, "and I'm not talking about the doll." "Hang on, Tyler," Rebecca protested. "Maybe it's just hiding its true self." "Forget this," Tyler said. "I should have realized that a living ventriloquist dummy was stupid. I'm going to the ice cream place down the street. If either of you wants to join me, you're welcome." Tyler leaves, and Rebecca gives me a pitiful expression. "Oh, go on, I know you like him," I said. "Thank you, James," Rebecca said, just before she left. Tyler was right. "You are stupid," I said, before throwing Longjaw across the room. I sat down on the couch and began to cry. I then turned my head to see Longjaw sitting up, staring at me. That's when I thought of something. "You're just a stupid piece of shit," I said. Longjaw then stood up. The only part of it still limp was its bottom jaw hanging by the string. I smiled as I opened the front door. "You're just a shitty little bitch and you should piss off." I darted out the front door and past Dad's car as it began to chase me. I stupidly ran into the woods. The puddles splashing behind me made me realize it was running faster than I could. I looked behind me to see that its arms were limp again, swinging back and forth, and the mud from the puddles had splattered all over its face. I then took out my phone and video called Rebecca and Tyler. When they answered, I showed them Longjaw behind me. "Shit! Don't stop running, dude," Tyler yelled. "I'm going to stop running," I yelled back. I put my phone in my pocket before stopping. I grabbed a stick that seemed pretty thick. As soon as Longjaw caught up with me, I swung the stick at it, breaking off the bottom jaw, causing Longjaw to stop running. "Take this, Mr. Longjaw," I yelled as I swung the stick once more, knocking its head off into the mud. Longjaw's body falls limp as I pull out my phone to show my friends on the video call. "You went for the head, that's so cool," Rebecca said. I then hung up the call and walked back home. When I got home, I saw that Dad's car was in the driveway. I went inside to look for him, and all I found was the same note on his door. Then I remembered I saw Dad's car when I left. I opened the door slowly to see Dad's dead body hanging over the side of his bed. On his back was a note that read, "Don't you recognize your dad's handwriting?" Then I heard a faint tapping sound coming from behind me.
Story 2. I am recording this message to sort out my thoughts and provide the most accurate information I can to those on the surface. I apologize if it is not the most cohesive possible. Given the circumstances I am facing, it is the best that I could do. There are about 4 reasons why I'll be dead by the time this reaches anyone. Number 1, I have 47 hours of oxygen left. There is no way to stretch that out. Trust me, I have tried. When this mess started, I had about a week's worth of supplies left. I knew that conserving energy would be a top priority. I closed off parts of our facility I wasn't going to use and ran everything on the minimum power required. I did everything by the book to make sure I could survive, and it's probably only shaved off a few hours for me. I don't know what day it is, but I'm sure that it's my last or close to it, because I don't see myself just sitting around and waiting to suffocate. You come to terms with your mortality down here pretty quick. I know I'm a goner. But that isn't really what scares me. Number 2. I am at the bottom of the ocean, and no one knows I'm here. For security reasons, none of us were allowed to know the base's location before we got here. At the time, I didn't question it. Government officials always like to keep secrets. And I figured that if it was at the bottom of the ocean, there wasn't much that could go wrong. It seemed like we would be safe. They even had a lot of rules and security measures that we reviewed before the deep dive to make sure we all understood what we were getting into. They hid everything. All I'd been initially told was that 6 of us would be sent to one of the most important projects of this century, and that the reward would be beyond measure. Not just money, although they did offer plenty. Fame and fortune, your name going down in history books. It was a hard thing to turn down, especially when the mystery itself intrigued me. I hadn't even been told who would be on the team. Only that secrecy and duty would be the top priority. When things started going wrong, naturally, I asked the others to see if anyone knew our location to get help. But those in charge felt it would be better if we were all on the same page. Or the other 5 that came here were lying. I guess it doesn't matter now, though, since they are dead, does it? Oh yeah, that ties into reason number 3. Number 3, all of my crewmates are dead. Several of them I killed by my own hand. I haven't the time to explain, and I'm not asking for forgiveness or some shit like that. The men and women stationed here with me went crazy. They turned on one another like vicious animals, and everything I did was purely for survival reasons only. I don't want to go into the details of what I did. I still can't come to terms with those choices myself. These people were all good, smart, resourceful, from every corner of the globe. None of them needed to be locked down here with this madness. When I ended their life, it was a mercy. At least that's what I tell myself. You see, we found something we weren't meant to, here in the depths of the ocean. It was the entire reason that we came here. I remember thinking that our instruments weren't working properly during the dive. The oceanographer, Paul Stratton, commented that the electromagnetism of the region was off the charts. What did that mean? I asked. He winked at me and told me that it meant this was something big. Given the lack of light and life, the abyssal zone, one of the darker regions of the deep ocean, is where I figured we must be stationed. But I soon found out the reason for the void was far more serious than that. Commander Mikhail Watley met us at the main decompression chamber to go over a few regulations for our stay. No communication with the surface. The monitoring station was to remain online at all times. Shifts to keep everything maintained would be determined in 12-hour increments. Dr. Agnes Booth, our chief physician, was the first to ask the big question. You make it sound like you have uncovered extraterrestrial life, Commander. What exactly is it that we will be researching? Michael showed us to the observatory deck, allowing the underwater floodlights beyond the deep ocean facility to activate and giving us all a chance to be in awe. According to the initial scans, it rested about 3,700 meters away from our location, and still, the object was massive from this range. Its edges touched the trench walls, making it feel almost purposeful that the large object had been placed here, in this remote location. Its hull was as white as ivory, unblemished and glistening across the entire surface. It did not indicate life, nor makeup that told me it was artificial. Yet, as the light refracted and hit it, I could tell that it wasn't truly a solid mass at all, but rather thousands or maybe millions of prisms that all were shimmering and moving in unity with one another to make up the object. It was at least the size of a 40-foot skyscraper. This is what all of you are here to find out. For the next 7 days, this monolith is your only priority. This facility has come equipped with everything you will need to safely observe, document and record anything surrounding this trench, Michael told us. All of us were obviously surprised that the previous teams hadn't made any sense of the strange object, but the commander had an explanation for that too. Until recently, we have been unable to allow any person into the facility for fear of disruption. The monolith seems to harm the area surrounding it, but it also tends to wane during the summertime, almost as if it's asleep or hibernating. This is the best chance we have to understand the thing, he explained. He paused for a moment to see if there were any interjections, and then explained how our mission would conclude. After the 7 days, a reconnaissance team will dive to get you, and to determine if further observations are made, Watley told us. Paul couldn't help but to wonder if maybe the death trap we were observing might wake up. The commander didn't answer that one, but instead rattled off a few other rules as he prepared for departure and finally concluded. I know all of you were chosen because you are the most capable men and women we have available. I have full confidence you can crack this. And we never saw him again. Number 4. There is a force at work here that could destroy all life as we know it. It doesn't take all of us to recognize that this thing cannot possibly be from this world, I stated once the commander had left and the reality of our bizarre assignment sunk in. We began reviewing what little data the last team had managed to scrounge so far. The monolith was composed of literally hundreds of different geological sources as far as we could tell. None of us understood at first how that could be possible. The data showed that the scraps of rock had been gathered from every ocean on Earth. It's very beautiful, I admitted as I looked toward the darkness above. We couldn't even truly see the top of the monolith because of how far down we were. The doctor said it was an abomination. It was no wonder why they kept this quiet, I thought. This thing was changing everything we ever thought we knew. And it could cause disruptions in space and time too from the data we expunged, whatever the hell that meant. Watley told us that we would be fine. So that's what we are going to rely on, I repeated. He seemed fine, didn't he? Paul asked nervously. None of us knew the man that well, so it wasn't ours to decide. But soon enough, we found out just how safe we really were. A few days passed with few incidents. We did our best to work under the circumstances we had been given and slowly became comfortable around the monolith. It was this sense of familiarity. I think that led to the first mistake. Mason attempted to send a drone out to get a closer view of the prisms and had the camera feed on live so everyone on the facility could get a better look. But the closer the tiny submarine got to the object, the more erratic our feed became. We tried to write it off as faulty tech, but there was a growing unease amid the free. But something was beginning to change in my coworkers at that moment. Strange noises were emitting from the drone's feed, and I could already tell it irritated Paul and Dr. Booth. Paul claimed it was so bad he wanted to rip his ears off. Liza ignored it and pushed forward. We soon found what seemed to be writings on the prisms, different languages. Alien? I had guessed. Instead, the answer was actually what turned out to be the most curious. The scan detected over 400 spoken dialects from our planet. All of these languages appeared to be human. Some were ancient, Mesopotamian, Enochian, but some appeared to be far more modern. Like the rocks, it had gathered pieces of our culture for as long as it had been down here. That seemed like the logical conclusion. But I wasn't so sure. Something about the stone seemed to have adapted since we got here. It was altering its makeup to show us things that hadn't been seen before. It made me worry about why that was. Wasn't the obelisk supposed to be asleep? Some of the noises might be tongues that we don't recognize, language of the future. I speculated that evening as we listened to the chatter that the radio picked up. There did seem to be a rhyme to the broadcast method, but I wasn't sure I was ready to accept the notion of time travel. Maybe this monolith didn't exist within the framework of the dimensions we were familiar with. It was almost like an informational black hole. Time and space seemed to be meaningless to it, so it could have easily been gathering data from all over the entire span of human history. Our astrophysicist appeared too soon to give his theory about the subject. Something in his stance and posture seemed off, but for some reason, I ignored it. The proper theoretical term is a white hole. Instead of consuming all things, including light, this monolith exudes constant power, information, and strength. It's an infinite chasm of possibilities, Gregory explained. So if we could tap into understanding it, we would be basically breaking the very fabric of our reality. That didn't sound good to me. He took a sip of his coffee, a strange glint in his eyes as he peered toward the monolith. Its very existence is the rip between our world and one beyond. It has pushed the limits. Now, we are just teetering the scales further toward oblivion. All right, maybe we shouldn't be all doom and gloom, I suggested. You don't understand, do you? This thing can see the future, the past, and the endless possibilities of the universe. It is everything. It's a god. And yet, we stand here trying to comprehend it. That's like looking at the sun, he sneered. None of us have been affected yet, I said. No. But I knew that wasn't entirely true. Paul had been staying up to attempt to communicate with the noises, and Liza hadn't gotten much sleep. I tried to tell Greg that it was fine. We weren't losing sanity. No, you idiot! It's worse than that. The monolith is going to exert power over us. It's only a matter of time before we turn on each other, Greg said. The next day, he locked himself in his room. And I had to kill my closest colleague on this wreck. I felt my breath hitting my face as I ran down the corridor from her. She had lost her mind because of a singular excursion using a pressurized suit to the monolith, gone for a few hours. When she returned to the main air chamber, she began speaking nonsense in tongues that we couldn't understand. Paul refused to let her on board. She used her own suit as a weapon, banging the helmet against the glass until it shattered. Blood and pain and endless walls. They rise, walk, scream, and crawl. Into the abyss they scurry. She shrieked as she came toward us like an animal. I found a nook to hide in as she clawed at Paul's face. His screams prompted me to try and stop this, using the nearby fire extinguisher as a weapon to bash her head on the metallic floor. When she was dead, Booth performed an autopsy, trying to comprehend what had happened. This is the answer that the doctor gave us. Her brain and body were accelerating through different quantum states. Almost as if she couldn't exist in our dimension anymore. Paul mumbled an excuse of how he had warned all of us not to go near the thing. Speaking of the monolith, since Liza's untimely death, it seems to have gotten larger, Greg told us. We decided to try and communicate with the surface after that, but it proved to be a pointless effort even with our skills. Time wasn't on our side, and we were too far down. Paul seemed determined to make it work, locking himself in the communication stray. The next day, I started to learn that I was not immune to the grip of the monolith. I was having hallucinations. It would often be Liza, her skin rippling and transforming on the edge of my mind even as I walked down the corridor and tried to perform the simplest task. She was always in constant pain, screaming about her suffering. It was those same hallucinations that made me kill Branch next, the illusions mixing with the facility around me when I bashed his head in. Then I went to the forward command center and glared at the monolith. It was a reminder to me that I was being watched. The chances of escape without being caught were less than nil. Agnes met me there with an unusual request. She said she wanted me to kill her. What? I whispered in shock. I know you've been struggling with your mental health. We all have. And I want to end it on my terms. If I die, it will be easier for the rest of you to survive longer. It's simple math. I don't have anyone on the outside to wait for. Nobody will miss me, she insisted. This is how it has to be. I think most people believe death is easy. For her, it wasn't. She choked on her blood for maybe 15 minutes when I cut her throat. As I watched her die, gag, and struggle to breathe, I wondered if she changed her mind about this, about all of the sacrifices that led her here. I should have told her I never intended to cannibalize her body. The truth is, I will kill the others and then commit suicide. I know that I can't let the research we have found come to light. The monolith is too dangerous. 7 days have passed since then. Paul wound up starving in the communications room. On day 5, Branch and I found his body and saw that he had carved more strange archaic symbols in his own blood on every surface. The monolith was trying to tell him something, Gregory whispered. What could it be? I asked. He turned to me and whispered the final reason why I knew I would die down here. We aren't alone. Greg's body began to break apart, the way a cocoon splinters the moment of metamorphosis. But this was not a beautiful, godly creature emerging. Long black skeletal claws that crushed apart his skin and muscle revealed rows of endless teeth and eyes as the hellish abomination screamed in a million tongues. I locked myself in the next room, the creature smashing its body to reach me over and over as I frantically worked to cause an implosion in the room. When it succeeded, I saw the creature tear apart into another 1,000 pieces, joining the ocean's vacuum as it was forced into the monolith. The object is all-encompassing now. I see it everywhere I look. I know that the forces from beyond are closing in. They taunt me with their screams as I struggle to finish these notes. I have discovered the horrible truth. This monolith did not come from the Earth, but from what came before our world. An entire dimension of chaos and destruction is what it harbors. Our days as the dominant species in this world have come to an end. The truth is that this was never our world to begin with. All this time, the monsters and the hell that rests beyond the gates of reality have only been hibernating. The monolith is the key to their world, and something is about to unlock it. I am thankful I am about to die now. I can't even imagine the apocalypse that will rain down when this thing finally chooses to stir the world above. Story 3.
Growing up with asthma was always a little challenging, but having a dad that smoked 2 packs a day made it even harder. Mom would always chastise him for the bad habit, and he would always claim that he would go cold turkey. It was a cycle with him. 1 week on, the next week off. Eventually, it made her just leave altogether, and I only saw her on weekends. It made it even harder since we lived in a rundown trailer park east of Seattle, so when he did decide to light one up, that meant finding clean air was nearly impossible unless I wanted to go outside and freeze to death in the early morning air. He smoked so much that it literally made the wallpaper peel and then turn a sickly yellow and brown. In fact, had I not developed lung cancer, I think he would have kept smoking until the day one of us died. But when I got the diagnosis and the doctor asked me if anyone in the family smoked, I saw his face go white as a sheet. I hate to say it, but for me, cancer was a golden ticket to a better life with Dad. His guilt drove him to buy me whatever I wanted, and I took full advantage of it. New phone, new shoes, new iPod. You name it, I got it. I didn't care what he had to go through. I figured my pain was reason enough for my selfishness. It went on like that for 5 months as I took my rounds of chemo and plugged him for every penny he had left. Even after the cancer was mostly gone, he still wanted to make up for all the mistakes he had made along the way. That all changed in August, though, when he filed for bankruptcy, and I found myself on a bus to stay with Mom. As much as I hated my dad, I also didn't want to leave him. Something had changed in those few months, something I didn't realize I would miss until it was gone. Mom was staying with Aunt Beatrice in Seattle in a sleazy apartment downtown, and the first thing that I noticed when I got there was the overwhelming smell of cigarette smoke. I started coughing profusely the minute I got inside the small, cramped space, and it felt like the walls were closing in. "Oh, for Christ's sake, it ain't that bad," Aunt B snapped. I went to the toilet and vomited, trying to keep my head from spinning anymore. Mom came in a few minutes later to check on me and rubbed my back gently. "I'm sorry, sweetie. It's only until your mom gets a job, then we can get out of here," she told me. I gave her a weak smile and told her I could handle it. The next few weeks showed me that I was wrong about that. If I thought Dad's addiction was terrible, Aunt B had him beat by 10 miles. There wasn't a moment that lady didn't have a cigarette in her hand. It got so bad that I couldn't even make it to school. I was so sick. I hated that woman. Mom taught me never to wish ill will on anyone, but if anybody deserved it, Aunt Bea sure as hell did. One particularly humid day, I tried to get up early and cook Mom some pancakes, and Bea was standing on the balcony on her 5th cigarette. It wasn't even 5:45. "That's going to rot your teeth out," I told her as I searched for the pots and pans. Bea whipped around and flared her nostrils at me. "Why don't you learn to keep your mouth shut? I ought to give you a piece of my mind," she snarled. "Are you sure you can afford to spare that much? You might wind up brain dead," I snapped back. I instantly regretted the words, and Bea slapped me across the face. She took out her cigarette from her mouth while it was still warm and maliciously dug it against the front of my arm. I cried in pain as she held it there until it had burnt out, and then she shoved me back across the room. "You need to watch your mouth. If it weren't for me, you and your mom would be out on the streets." She stormed off to her room, and I crawled up against the wall and curled into a ball. I shook and cried for a moment longer as I stared up at the brown-stained walls, wishing that life could be different for me. That was when I saw something move there, amid the cascade of stains and dried paint. It shimmered and slid across the wall, like some kind of wet, splashy oil moving across the borders of the old peeling frames. I stared at it for a moment longer, rubbing my eyes and trying to make sense of the phenomenon. When I let my vision adjust, the swirling colors had stopped altogether, and I found myself staring at the same old dull texture as nothing had happened. My mom entered the room a moment later, wearing a shabby dress and placing earrings on as she hastily got ready to go. "Aunt Bea got me an interview at that little diner on South Palm. Wish me luck, hun," she squealed with delight. I don't even know if she noticed I was just standing there in a fog. Bea came out next, glaring at me to be quiet about our earlier little encounter and following Mom out of the apartment without a single word. Once they were gone, I turned my attention back toward the wall, still trying to make sense of what I had seen. I moved the couch gently out of the way to touch the texture, noticing that the spot where I had seen the colors moving was wet like it had recently been painted. As I moved my hand across the wall, I felt something slide against my fingers, and I recoiled in surprise, a gray slime dripping from my palm. I shook it away and stood up, realizing that the same abnormal behavior I had seen on the wall was happening again, and this time with greater intensity. The pool of brown, dark and blotchy colors slid down off the wall and onto the floor, forming a sizable gelatinous mass near the couch as I scrambled away. I held my breath, nearly having an asthma attack as the sludge grew more significant still, slithering its way toward me and then stopping midway through the living room. I found myself frozen against the wall, looking down at the endless black hole that was now straight in front of me, and then watching as something pulled itself out of the slime. It moved up through the air, a menagerie of unformed shapes and colors searching for structure as I saw it reach nearly 7 feet tall, bulky and uncontrolled. As the form took shape, I saw arms stretching out in an empty ribcage, an ethereal skeleton from the darkness. I ran toward the door, desperate to escape. Delirious and scared, I reached for the handle as I heard a voice whisper my name. The half-made face was staring at me with no eyes, its jaw and mouth nothing but further pools of slime spilling out onto the floor. I screamed. I opened the door and made my way downstairs, trying to escape it. As I made my way out to the streets below, I stopped in my tracks and thought of Mom. She would be done if she came home with that thing in the apartment. I did the only thing I thought made sense and asked the super to call the police. I stayed in the apartment lobby until the police arrived alongside Beatrice and Mom. "Julian, what's going on?" Mom asked frantically. We waited downstairs as the police checked the 3rd floor. I lied and told them that someone had broken into the apartment. But less than 30 minutes later, they returned and told us that nothing was out of place, nor was there any indication of forced entry. They left and gave me a soft warning not to make a false claim like that again. Once we were alone in the apartment, Beatrice snubbed her nose at me and remarked, "Figures a brat like you would pull a stunt like this." I turned to Mom for support, but she was just as furious. "I was in the middle of an interview, Julian. You can't be doing things like this. I'm not like your dad, and you can't just have me at your beck and call." That stung more than the cigarette burn had. I went to my room and slumped on my bed. I wanted to cry, but I was so out of breath that I was sure I would have to have a breathing treatment if I did. Instead, I just stayed in bed and stared at the walls, trying to decide if I was going crazy or not. That night, I found out. I didn't even bother to try to go to sleep. I just stared at the walls, trying to determine what this monster wanted with me. Once it was so dark that I could hardly see the hand in front of my face, I decided to muster up the courage to confront the demon. "Show yourself," I whispered cautiously to the wall. This time, it wasted no effort to step out from the dark stains near my closet. It had the shape and structure of a tall, sickly man, but in the darkness, I couldn't see anything else, only that it was filled with shimmering holes in its body, and when it spoke, it sounded like a rasp. "You have something that does not belong to you." It answered as it lurched forward toward me. I tried not to shiver as I pulled my blankets over my trembling body. I don't have anything," I told the being. "But whatever it is, you can have it." "Are you certain?" it asked as its mouth opened wider than I thought possible. Sometimes the things we do not want are the things that are most valuable to us. I looked at its strange, unformed body, its peculiar stance and deadly eyes, and realized that there was something familiar about it. It reminded me of the sickness I had carried for half a year. Whatever this being was, I knew that its reason for being here was more than to frighten. Are you asking me what I want?" I mouthed, trying to make sense of the riddles it spoke. "Your body was once racked with disease. Now, all that fills it is hate." I couldn't argue with that, but what did this bizarre monster know of such things? "You don't scare me. I've laughed death in the face, and I don't care if I die," I told it bravely. Its laugh was ragged and hoarse. "If you are so brave, then speak your heart's desire. I can make it true." I considered its offer for a long moment. This had to be a dream, a lack of sleep and sickness taking its toll on my body. Convinced I was talking to an illusion, I said, "I want to be free. I want to get away from here and get back with my dad. At least there, I could do what I wanted. I could give you that freedom." The monster snickered as it swirled toward the door. "All I ask is for your hate." I paused and felt my mouth go dry. Such an odd request. How could I say no? My mother had always told me that I needed a pure heart. Was this thing offering to cleanse my soul? "Take it then. It's yours," I said, without hesitation. I shook and swayed as the creature's shimmering body opened wide and seemed to grow larger with each passing second. One of its long, slimy appendages reached out toward me, and I flinched as it covered my skin. It felt like a vacuum was slowly sucking away at the edge of my nerves. I thought for sure I would pass out, or that the dream would end soon. At last, it released its grip on me, and I lay down on the bed like a limp doll, exhausted from whatever it had done to me, as it seemed to ebb and flow across the room with extreme pleasure over the meal I had apparently offered up to it. The creature moved toward the wall again, pushing its body against the tapestry as it whispered a final goodbye. "You may find freedom, the heaviest burden of all to carry." At last it disappeared from sight. I stood in confusion for a moment longer, confident it would return to terrorize me again. As I settled down on my bed, though, I did feel different. Something was gone inside my heart. I didn't feel, well, anything anymore. I smiled and relaxed in bed and closed my eyes, confident that the paranormal encounter would somehow make for an exciting conversation at breakfast in the morning. I sprung out of bed a few hours later, eager to seize the day and see if the odd wish I had asked for had any chance of coming true. "Mom, you'll never guess what I dreamed about last night," I said as I walked into the kitchen. The room was silent, though, and for the first time since we had arrived, I noticed that the smell of smoke was nowhere to be found in the house. I moved toward Aunt Bee's room to wake her, her door slightly ajar, and shouted, "Hey, rise and shine. We have church today." Bee didn't respond. I moved over toward her, shook her to wake, and then realized her body felt cold. I screamed and ran to Mom's room. As I stepped into the dim lighting, I already knew that something had happened to her as well. I will never forget that sight. Her body had literally melted against the twin bed. Nothing but a pool of skin and muscle was now scorching the carpet where she had once laid. Dark oil splotches covered the room, a testimony to what the monster had done. I screamed louder, my breath going out as I stumbled to the carpet and reached for my inhaler from my back pocket. But as many times as I used it, nothing seemed to refill my lungs except more panic and desperation as I cried in exasperation. The official report said Beatrice had killed my mother by roasting her alive in her room and then committing suicide, but I know that was because the examiners didn't know what to make of any of it. Dad came the next day to take me back to the trailer park. He was staying with a friend now, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. "Hey, kiddo, good to see you," he said as he came to pick me up. Tears welled in my eyes as we left Seattle. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? To be free? I knew that the monster had granted my wish, given me what I thought I wanted. But now, as we made it back to the rundown recreational park, I felt even more hollow than that creature. We made it inside, and I told him I would go wash up for supper. My nerves still rattled from everything that had happened. When I got back out, I saw that Dad was sitting and watching TV, drinking a beer and smoking a Marlboro. "I thought you said you quit," I told him in frustration. "Sorry, hun, this is the last one." I balled up my fists and closed my eyes in frustration. When I opened them again, I saw a gentle shimmer on the east wall of the trailer. My mouth was dry and ragged as I felt my breathing increase. No, not again. "Julian, are you okay?" Dad asked as I called my nerves as the movement on the wall disappeared from sight. "No, Dad, it's fine," I told him warily as I went to my small room. I didn't say a word to him about it after that, and the creature never made another appearance. The cancer came back, though, and this time the doctors told me it's probably going to stay. I told my dad that I was okay with having a death sentence. Honestly, that's because I know now that there are far worse things to endure